You're in my seat. The help sits in the back. The first-class cabin of Apex Sky Flight 214 went silent the moment those words hit the air. Not a polite silence. Not the gentle hush of passengers settling in and minding their own business. This was the kind of silence that presses against the ears. Sharp, electric, the kind that makes strangers suddenly very aware of one another's breathing. A man halfway through lifting his champagne glass froze the liquid trembling near the rim. An older woman across the aisle stiffened her lips, pressing into a thin, uneasy line. A young flight attendant near the galley curtain brought her hand slowly to her mouth. Diana Hartwell stood in the aisle of first class with her manicured hand extended, palm angled downward, fingers pointing toward the back of the plane. Not a suggestion, an order. The tone of a woman who had never once been questioned in public and did not intend to start now. She was 52 years old. Blonde hair cut into a sharp, deliberate bob. A cream-colored blazer that had not been purchased on sale. A diamond on her left hand that caught the overhead cabin light and threw it back without apology. She carried a monogrammed bag over one shoulder, and she held herself the way people do when they have spent decades being moved toward the front of every line. Chin lifted weight back on her heels, the posture of someone who expects gravity to bend in her direction. She was not whispering. She was not trying to be discreet. She said it so that the row could hear, so that the rows behind the row could hear. Her voice carried the calm certainty of someone delivering a verdict, not starting a conversation. The man she was speaking to did not react right away. He sat still in seat 1. A shoulders relaxed back straight against cream-colored leather that smelled faintly of citrus and recirculated air. He wore a dark charcoal hoodie, soft with wear, the cuffs frayed just enough to look honest rather than deliberate. Dark, slim jeans, white sneakers clean, but not brand new, not loud. No suit. No tie, no jewelry catching the light, no briefcase wedged under the seat in front. Nothing that announced wealth. Nothing that announced anything at all. His hands rested open on his thighs. Diana's eyes had swept over him the moment she stepped into first class. It took her 3 seconds. She cataloged everything. The hoodie, the sneakers, the absence of any visible marker of a man who belonged in a seat like this one. And in those 3 seconds, she reached a conclusion. Her lip curled almost imperceptibly the way people react to a smell they do not want to acknowledge. She spoke again, louder. "Excuse me, did you not hear me?" He turned his head just enough to look at her. His face was unreadable. Dark eyes steady, no apology in them, no confusion, no fear, just attention. The kind that does not ask permission and does not offer explanation. "I heard you," he said. His voice was low, even, not defensive, not aggressive. The kind of voice that did not need to prove anything to anyone in the room. It simply existed like the seat he was sitting in. Diana laughed, a short, humorless sound. "Then move. This is my seat." A young flight attendant hovered a few feet away. Her name tag read Sophia. She was 26, olive skin, dark hair, pulled back, her uniform still crisp from the start of the shift. Her hands were clasped so tightly in front of her that her knuckles had gone pale. "Ma'am," Sophia began, her voice thin. "Seat 1B is right here. It's an aisle seat, same space, same. I don't want 1B. Diana didn't look at her. "I booked the window. I always sit at the window." She turned back to the man in 1A. "You need to get up, now." He glanced down at his boarding pass. Not because he needed to check it. He already knew what it said. He did it slowly, deliberately. A small, quiet courtesy extended to a situation that had not earned it. Then he looked back up at her. "This is 1A, he said. "That's what's on my ticket." Diana's face flushed, the color rising fast beneath carefully applied makeup. She turned sharply toward Sophia. "Check his ticket, immediately." Sophia stepped forward and swallowed hard. She held out her hand. The man passed his boarding pass over without hesitation. Their eyes met for half a second. Something moved through that exchange. Recognition, maybe, or concern, or the quiet understanding between two people who both already knew how this was going to go. Sophia scanned the pass. Once, twice, her breath caught. "He's correct, ma'am," she said quietly. "He's assigned to 1A. Your seat is 1B. For a long beat, Diana simply stared at her. Then she leaned toward the man in the seat, lowering her voice into something intimate and cold. "I don't know how you got upgraded," she said. "Maybe a system glitch. Maybe you scraped miles together. But I paid good money for this seat. Real money." She straightened, letting her voice rise just enough so that the rows closest to her could hear. "I am a diamond-level member. My husband's firm is one of this airline's largest corporate accounts. I need the window to work." The man didn't raise his voice, didn't shift in his seat, didn't blink. "I plan to sleep," he said. "The aisle seat is identical. You'll be fine." Her smile vanished. "Next to you," she scoffed. The words hung in the air between them. Thick, loaded, ugly. The kind of thing that doesn't need to be finished to be completely understood. A man across the aisle cleared his throat and then thought better of saying anything. The older woman, 2 rows back, shook her head slowly, fixing her gaze on the seat in front of her, as though refusing to witness what was unfolding. Diana crossed her arms. "Look at you," she said. "You're dressed like you don't belong here. I am not spending 7 hours sitting next to someone like that." From near the galley, Sophia gasped softly. The man's jaw tightened. Just slightly. A muscle moved near his temple. Then it was still again. His voice, when he spoke, was colder now. Not loud, just colder. "I paid for this seat," he said. "I'm not moving." Diana's eyes hardened. Something shifted behind them. Calculation. Decision. She reached down suddenly and grabbed his carry-on bag from beside the seat, lifted it with surprising force, and threw it into the aisle. The sound was dull, heavy final. The cabin flinched as one. He looked at his bag on the floor. He looked at it for longer than expected. Not startled, not performing patience. Whatever was inside that bag mattered, practically, expensively. The kind of thing that doesn't belong on the floor of an aircraft aisle, thrown there by a stranger who had decided before he said a single word that he didn't belong. Then he looked back up at her. "You shouldn't have done that," he said. He said it softly. That was what made it carry. Diana smiled. "I'll do whatever I want. I fly this airline all the time." "I know," he said. She heard those 2 words as retreat, as the beginning of capitulation. She heard a man running out of options using the only dignity-preserving syllables left to him before he eventually stood up and moved. She was wrong about what she had heard. In exactly 31 minutes, Diana Hartwell would be escorted off this aircraft in handcuffs. But first, she would make every mistake that was left to make, loudly, publicly, and completely on camera. Before we go any further, drop your city in the comments right now. Seriously, tell me where you're watching from, because this story is about to go somewhere that you are not going to see coming, and I want to know who is with me. And if you have ever walked into a room, any room, and felt someone decide who you were before you said a single word, before you showed a single credential, before you gave them any reason at all, then this story is for you. Hit that subscribe button right now, because we tell stories here where quiet strength wins. Every single time. Now, let me ask you something before we go back to that cabin. Have you ever been Marcus in that moment? Standing somewhere, you earned the right to stand, dressed the way you felt like dressing that morning, carrying nothing that announced your value, and watching someone look straight through you and see exactly what they expected to see instead of who you actually are. Most people, when that happens, take the easier exit. Move the seat, accept the voucher, swallow the discomfort, and tell themselves it is not worth it, and nobody can blame them for that. Choosing your battles is survival. But every now and then, someone chooses not to move. And when that person is the CEO and controlling shareholder of the airline the other person is standing on, well, let us go back to the moment Marcus Ellison stepped onto that plane. Because what you saw in the first few minutes was only the surface of what was happening. There is a history beneath it. There is a reason he was so still while she was so loud. There is a reason he said, "I know," in that quiet, final way, and meant something entirely different than what she heard. There is a reason that bag on the floor of that aisle did not break him. It built him once, a long time ago, in a different room with a different face delivering a different version of the same message. Let us rewind to how this morning really started. Marcus Ellison arrived at the gate 40 minutes early, not because he needed to. He had a seat assignment, a priority boarding pass, and 12 years of practice moving through airports without friction. He could have arrived at the last call and walked straight to his seat without the line, without the crowd, without the overhead bin scramble that turned otherwise reasonable adults into competitive strangers. He arrived early because he liked to watch systems wake up. There was something he had always found useful in observing a place before it knew it was being observed. The way a terminal handled its first rush, the way gate agents rotated shifts, the way a boarding line formed organically long before the announcement. He had learned more about his own airline in quiet observation than he had in 2 decades of executive briefings. Numbers told you what was happening. Watching told you why. He moved through the terminal without an entourage. No assistant trailing behind him with a rolling bag and a phone pressed to each ear. No security detail. No one who announced his presence before he arrived. Just a man in a dark hoodie and clean sneakers carry-on in one hand, coffee in the other, moving at the pace of someone who had nowhere to be, in a hurry and everywhere to be eventually. He found a seat near the gate window and watched Flight 214 on the tarmac below. A ground crew was finishing the fuel line check. One of the crew members had rigged a piece of duct tape over a loose panel near the nose gear housing, a workaround Marcus recognized from a maintenance report he had read 3 months ago. The permanent fix had been scheduled for the following service cycle. He made a note to confirm it had been completed. This was how he spent the 40 minutes. When general boarding opened, he joined the back of the priority line. Not the front, a habit. He had learned that the front of the priority line was full of people who needed to demonstrate their status, and the back of it was full of people who were simply going somewhere. He preferred the company of the second group. He stepped onto the aircraft and exchanged a nod with the agent at the door. A brief acknowledgement, nothing ceremonial. Inside the first-class cabin was nearly empty. The soft lighting above the rows was casting a blue-white glow across the cream leather headrests. Marcus paused for a fraction of a second at the threshold. He had approved that lighting specification 4 years ago, a cooler tone than the industry standard chosen because research showed it reduced anxiety in nervous flyers during boarding. Standing under it now, he noted that it worked. He moved to seat 1A. Before he sat down, a voice came from the galley. "Good morning." He turned. Sophia Reyes was arranging blankets in the overhead compartment beside the galley entrance, her movements efficient and practiced. She had looked up without ceremony. Not because she recognized him, not because she was performing attentiveness for a supervisor. She looked up because a passenger had entered the cabin, and greeting them was what she was there to do. "Good morning," Marcus said. "Long flight today," she said, not searching for conversation, just noting a fact. "Not for me," he said. "I plan to sleep." She smiled. Brief, genuine, the smile of someone who has heard every version of that intention and knows how rarely it survives the first hour of a transatlantic cabin. "I will make sure you are not disturbed." He thanked her and settled into 1A. There was something in the simplicity of that exchange, its decency, its normalcy, that stood apart from the morning in a way he could not immediately name. He would think about it later. 3 rows back in seat 3, a Nathan Okafor was already set up. He was 31 years old with a lived-in face and the kind of quiet alertness that came from years of watching public spaces for the moment everything changed. He had 340,000 followers on a platform dedicated to documenting real moments in real places, not staged, not scripted, not optimized for any emotion other than truth. He called his channel simply Real Rooms. He had built it over 4 years by pointing a camera at the world and refusing to narrate over what it was already saying. He was not looking for anything specific this morning. He was in first class because his editor had upgraded him as a thank you for a project he had finished early, and he was still slightly bewildered by the legroom. His phone was mounted on a small, flexible tripod attached to his tray table, positioned to capture the cabin broadly, not aimed at anyone specifically, at a wide enough angle that it read as a passenger recording a personal travel vlog. The live stream was running at low visibility. No banner, no alert, just open. When he saw Marcus settle into 1A, alone calm, dressed in a hoodie in first class, carrying nothing that announced importance, Nathan recognized something. Not the man specifically, a pattern. He had seen this pattern before many times in many rooms. He leaned slightly back in his seat, adjusted the phone angle by 2 degrees, and waited. Not because he wanted drama, because he knew what it felt like when the room was about to change and he had learned never to look away. At the front of the boarding line outside, Diana Hartwell moved through the jet bridge the way she moved through every threshold, as though the path had been cleared specifically for her arrival. She was carrying her monogrammed bag and a sense of occasion. She paused briefly at the aircraft door to exchange a word with the boarding agent in the tone of someone who expected to be recognized. The agent smiled professionally. Diana stepped inside. Her eyes swept the cabin from front to back in a single practiced motion, cataloging seat assignments, assessing the other early boarders, establishing the layout of the space she was about to occupy. Her gaze moved along the first row. It stopped. A man in a dark hoodie. Seat 1. A. Jeans. Sneakers. No laptop open. No suit jacket folded over the seat beside him. Nothing visible that read as first class in the way she understood first class to mean. Something shifted in Diana Hartwell's expression. Not surprise. Something slower and more certain than surprise. Recalculation. She continued down the aisle. As she passed row 2, she exchanged a brief nod with Brad Whitmore. 41 businessman laptop already opened the nod of 2 people who believe they occupy the same tier of things. Brad had been in seat 2A for 15 minutes and had already ordered still water without ice. He had not looked up at Marcus when Marcus boarded. He had looked up now. Diana reached row 1. She set her bag in the overhead bin above seat 1B with a controlled, deliberate motion. The motion of someone taking possession of a space. She looked at 1B. Then she looked at 1A. Then she made a decision, and the cabin had no idea yet what it was about to witness. Diana did not sit down. She stood in the aisle beside row 1 and tilted her head the way people do when they are performing patience for an audience, not feeling it, performing it, and she spoke. "Excuse me." Her voice was light, practiced, the tone of mild inconvenience being graciously managed. "I think there has been a mix-up." Marcus was reading something on his phone. He finished the sentence before he looked up. When he did, he looked at her fully. Not with hostility, not with performance, just with complete attention. "I do not think so," he said. Diana blinked once. That was not the response she had expected. She adjusted. "I always sit at the window," she said. "I specifically requested this seat when I booked." Seat 1. A window bulkhead row. I am a diamond-level member. 11 consecutive years. This flight, I arranged it especially because I have material I need to review for a presentation, and I require the natural light. I am sure you can understand. It was a masterfully constructed sentence. It had duration, long enough to establish context. It had credential, the membership, the years the word arranged. It had reasonableness. She needed something, and she was explaining why. It framed her as the reasonable party by implication before he had a chance to be. Marcus reached into the front pocket of his hoodie and produced his boarding pass. He held it out to her, not handing it over, just holding it where she could see. She looked at it for 2 seconds. Then she looked at the seat number on the headrest, then back at the pass, then at Marcus. "Sophia," she said. Sophia Reyes appeared from the galley with the particular speed of someone who has been listening from 3 feet away waiting to be called. She stopped beside Diana and looked between the 2 of them. "Ma'am, I need you to verify this gentleman's seat assignment." The word gentleman was delivered with a very specific inflection. Not warmth, not disrespect, something more precise than either. The inflection of someone using the correct word while meaning a different one. Sophia took Marcus's boarding pass. She looked at it. She opened her tablet and checked the manifest. She checked it a second time slowly, as though hoping the second reading would produce a different result than the first. It did not. "He is correct, ma'am," Sophia said. Her voice was steady, though her hands were not entirely. "He is assigned to 1A. Your assignment is 1B. Diana did not move. "Are you certain?" she said. Sometimes upgrades get processed incorrectly. The system does glitch, especially for passengers who are not. She paused. 1 beat. "Traveling in this cabin regularly." The pause was small enough that it could be walked back. Small enough that Diana could claim she had simply been searching for the right phrase. but it landed exactly where she had aimed it. Sophia glanced at Marcus. He was looking at Diana with an expression that revealed nothing but received everything. "I am certain, ma'am," Sophia said. "The assignment is correct." Diana made a sound that was not quite a sigh and not quite a scoff, something in the space between the two. She looked at seat 1B as though it had personally offended her. Then she looked back at Marcus. "I am sure you would be perfectly comfortable in the aisle seat," she said. "It is the same service level, the same amenities. Most passengers actually prefer the aisle for a long flight." Her tone had warmed slightly, the warmth of someone offering a favor rather than making a demand, which was exactly how she wanted it to sound. "I am sure they do," Marcus said. "I prefer the window." Brad Whitmore from 2A looked up from his laptop. He did not speak. He simply looked, first at Diana, then at Marcus, and the corner of his mouth lifted in a small, private expression that he did not intend anyone to notice. But it was there. Diana clasped her hands in front of her. The composure was starting to require effort now, visible in the set of her jaw and the deliberate steadiness of her breathing. "My husband's firm," she said, "spends in excess of $400,000 annually with this airline. I have been a Diamond Level member for 11 years. I have flown this specific route, this specific seat, more times than I can count. What I am asking for is a simple courtesy, not a demand. A courtesy." "I understand," Marcus said, "and my answer is still no." The cabin temperature dropped by several degrees. Sophia took a half step back, not retreating exactly, but making space for what was coming. 3 rows back, Nathan Okafor had not moved, had not changed his expression, but his right hand had drifted casually to the angle of his phone mount and corrected it by 2 degrees. "I see," Diana said. Her voice had gone very smooth now, the smoothness that comes not from calm but from a decision. "So you are choosing to make this difficult." "I am choosing to sit in my seat," Marcus said. "For 7 hours, she said, I will be sitting next to—" She stopped herself, restarted, "next to someone I did not anticipate." "That happens on flights," Marcus said. She looked at him. Then she said it. No more careful packaging, no more inflection that could be walked back, just the thing itself, dropped into the cabin air like something that had been waiting to be said since she first saw him board. "I am not spending 7 hours next to someone like that." The words landed differently than anything before them. 3 rows back, a woman in a blue cardigan. She had been reading and had put her book down 2 minutes earlier without fully realizing it. Closed her eyes for a second. A man in a gray suit across the aisle exhaled slowly through his nose. The older woman, who had been stiffening since the beginning, shook her head once, very slightly, as though confirming something she had hoped not to have to confirm. Sophia stood very still. Marcus said nothing. He looked at Diana Hartwell, not with anger, not with the visible effort of someone suppressing anger, but with the steady, measuring attention of a person who is deciding something, making a final accounting. Then he spoke. "I paid for this seat," he said. "I am not moving." Diana's eyes hardened into something cold and absolute. She had tried the reasonable version. She had tried the credential version. She had tried the favor-framing version. All 3 had been declined without drama, without apology, without the kind of visible distress that would have given her something to leverage. She reached up to the overhead compartment. She took hold of his carry-on bag. She pulled it out and threw it into the aisle. The sound it made when it hit the carpet was heavy and final. The sound of an object that contained things that mattered making contact with a floor it was never meant to touch. The cabin flinched as a single body. Sophia's hands flew to her mouth. From somewhere in the rows behind, a man said under his breath, "Oh my God." Marcus looked at his bag on the floor. He looked at it for longer than felt comfortable. 5 seconds, maybe 6. And in those seconds, the cabin was so quiet that the background hum of the aircraft's systems filled the air completely. The bag had his laptop in it, his presentation materials for a board meeting scheduled for the following morning, items that were practically speaking expensive and important. None of that was the point. The point was a woman who had decided before he spoke, before he produced his boarding pass, before he demonstrated by any measure available to her that he had earned the right to be where he was. She had decided, based entirely on what he looked like, that he did not belong. And when her certainty met the immovable fact of his boarding pass, she had thrown his property on the floor of his aircraft. He looked up at her. "You should not have done that," he said. He said it softly. That was what made it carry. Diana smiled. "I will do whatever I want. I fly this airline all the time." "I know," he said. She heard those two words as retreat, as the beginning of capitulation. She heard a man running out of options, using the only dignity-preserving syllables left to him before he eventually stood up and moved. She was wrong. Marcus reached into the pocket of his hoodie and typed a message on his phone. Not a call. A message. 4 words. On the other side, Ava Monroe, Chief of Communications at Apex Sky Airlines, sitting in her office in Midtown Manhattan with a coffee she had not touched in 40 minutes, read the message on her screen. She had already been watching the Reddit thread. She had already pulled up Nathan Okafor's stream on a second monitor and watched it for 11 minutes in growing controlled alarm. She had been waiting for this message. She began making calls. Nathan Okafor looked at his phone screen. 14 minutes since he had opened the live stream. The viewer count was sitting at 612, a normal number for a travel vlog at that hour. Then, in the 40 seconds following the sound of the bag hitting the floor, the number moved. 800, 1100, 1400. Nathan had been doing this for 4 years. He had learned through the specific education of posting thousands of hours of unedited footage into the world to distinguish between the kinds of moments that people clicked away from and the kinds that made them stay and reach for the nearest person to show their screen to. The first kind was most things. The second kind was rare, and when it happened fast, and it did not reverse. He watched the number pass 2,000. He had not commented. He had not narrated. He had not added text overlay or context or framing. He had not in any meaningful way done anything except point a camera at a row of seats in a first-class cabin and press a button 14 minutes ago. The situation was doing the rest entirely on its own. He added 1 line of text beneath the stream, typed with his thumb, "Casual Factual Apex Sky Flight 214. JFK to LAX. First class. This is live." The number passed 3,500. Comments were running faster than he could read them. "Did she just say what I think she said? Is this being reported? Someone call the airline? This is first class. This is insane. Why is nobody doing anything?" He has not moved. He has not said anything. He is just standing there. 2 rows ahead of Nathan, a woman named Lacey Drummond was doing something different. Lacey was 38, Latina, a travel blogger, with 180,000 followers on Instagram who specialized in hotel and airline reviews. She had been in first class because she was on a press trip and had been upgraded, and she had been quietly composing a caption for a photo of her champagne glass when the bag hit the floor. She had put the champagne photo down. She had started filming. Not a live stream. A series of short clip stories, the kind of thing that would appear at the top of a feed and disappear after 24 hours, unless someone saved it. She had posted the first one 40 seconds after the bag landed a single clip of Diana standing in the aisle. Voice audible, and then her own face filling the frame, eyes wide, and the caption, "I am watching something happen in front of me, and I do not know what to do." 40,000 views in 11 minutes. She posted a second story. Just text white, on black, written fast, with the mistakes left in, "He has not raised his voice. He has not threatened anyone. He produced his boarding pass. His seat assignment is correct." She threw his bag on the floor. He picked it up quietly and put it back. He is still sitting there. 22,000 views in 4 minutes. And then in row 2, Craig Mercer appeared. Craig was the lead flight attendant on this flight. 49 years old, gray at the temples, the kind of veteran cabin crew who had spent his career developing the precise ability to read a room in 3 seconds and respond to it in a way that kept everything moving. He had spent those same 20 years learning that in first class, the most important skill was not conflict resolution. It was priority management. And in first class, priority was rarely ambiguous. He had heard the bag hit the floor from inside the galley. He had counted to 3 before stepping out. He had assessed the scene. The bag back in the overhead, the man seated and calm, the woman standing in the aisle with the expression of someone who expected a resolution in her favor. And in 3 seconds, he had made his calculation. He walked toward Diana first. "Mrs. Hartwell." He kept his voice low and private, the tone of a professional managing a difficulty between equals. "I completely understand this has been frustrating. Let me see what we can do." Sophia, standing 3 feet away, watched him, her jaw tightened. Craig turned to Marcus. His expression was courteous, careful, and already apologetic in advance for what he was about to say. "Sir, I want to make sure we can get everyone settled comfortably before departure. We have an excellent seat available in row 2. Same service level, same amenities, fully equivalent experience. Would you?" "No," Marcus said. Craig blinked. It was a very short word delivered without heat or ceremony, and it left him exactly nowhere to go. "Sir, I understand," he started again. "However, given the what Marcus said." Craig stopped. He opened his mouth. Nothing came out. Because when he searched for the rest of that sentence, given the circumstances, given the situation, given the difficulty, all the words that were available to him were simply different ways of saying, given that a woman has decided your presence is unacceptable, and this airline is considering honoring that decision. He could not say that. But he could not unthink it either. Sophia watched him. The tightness in her jaw moved to her hands. Nathan Okafor, 5,200 viewers. A thread had appeared on Reddit. He could see it in the comments linking back. Titled, "First-Class Passenger Being Pressured to Move After Racist Incident. Live. JFK to LAX flight happening right now." The thread had 200 comments in 8 minutes, most of them directing people to the stream, some tagging Apex Sky's official social accounts directly. The airline social team would see it within 15 minutes. Ava Monroe would see it within 12. But right now, in row 1 of Flight 214, Craig Mercer was standing in the aisle between a man who was right and a woman who was loud, and he was choosing the loud one because he had always chosen the loud one and it had always worked out before. Sophia turned and walked back to the galley. She did not slam anything. She did not make a sound. She simply went back to her station, took out her personal phone, and began typing. She typed everything. The time, the words she had heard, the sequence, the name on the boarding pass, what Craig had said to Mrs. Hartwell first, and what he had said to the man in 1, a second, and what he had said when asked, given the what, and had no answer. She typed it all. She did not know yet why she was doing it. She only knew that some things needed to exist somewhere permanent before they could be lost. Craig Mercer spent 2 more minutes in the aisle attempting variations on the same request before something in his professional instinct told him to stop. Not because Marcus had raised his voice. Marcus had not raised his voice once. Not because the situation had escalated in any visible way. Diana was still standing. Marcus was still seated. The boarding door was still open. The plane had not pushed back. Craig stopped because he had been in a version of this scene before in different cabins with different people, and he knew the particular quality of the stillness that meant the easy resolution had already passed. This was that stillness. He leaned toward Marcus slightly, keeping his voice low enough that the rows immediately behind them would not hear. "Sir, would you be willing to step to the galley for a moment? Just a private word." Marcus looked at him. Of course, he said. He stood. He was taller than Craig expected. Not dramatically, perhaps 2 inches of height above Craig's own, but the quality of the way he occupied that height was different. He did not expand. He did not posture. He simply stood at full size without any effort to make that size comfortable for anyone else. Diana watched Marcus stand and move toward the galley. She settled into seat 1A with the efficiency of someone completing a task. She adjusted the pillow. She reached for the call button, then thought better of it and placed her hands in her lap instead. The expression on her face was controlled satisfaction. The face of someone who believes the right people have been consulted and the correct outcome is being processed. Nathan Okafor watched her settle into the seat. He did not comment. He tilted his phone mount a fraction of a degree. 7,100 viewers. In the galley, Craig pulled the curtain closed with practiced discretion. He turned to face Marcus and took a breath. "Mr. Ellison," he said, "I want to be straightforward with you." "I would appreciate that," Marcus said. "Mrs. Hartwell is a long-standing premium client. Her husband's corporate account represents significant revenue for this airline, and she has, Craig paused, choosing his phrasing carefully, a history of escalating situations when she feels her needs have not been addressed. If she files a formal complaint, there are people in this company who will expect me to have handled this differently. I am not telling you that is right. I am telling you that it is the reality I am operating inside. A silence. Marcus did not fill it. Craig pressed on. We can offer you the same seat in premium economy, upgraded full amenities, additional legroom, and a travel voucher that would more than... No, Marcus said. Craig blinked. Mr. Ellison, I want to... Say that back to me, Marcus said. What you just said. Say it back. Craig looked at him. You told me, Marcus said, keeping his voice completely even, that a passenger's comfort with my presence outweighs the seat assignment on my boarding pass. And you called that reality. He tilted his head very slightly. Is that what you meant? Craig's mouth opened, then it closed. The words were accurate. They were exactly what he had meant. Hearing them in that order, in that phrasing, with nothing softening them, they sounded like something he would never say aloud in this building. And yet, he had said them. 2 minutes ago in this galley to this man. I am going back to my seat, Marcus said. Everything that happens from this point forward is being documented. Craig documented. By who? Marcus did not answer. He reached for the curtain. Mr. Ellison, Craig started. Marcus stepped back into the cabin. Sophia was standing near the galley entrance, arms at her sides, watching Craig when he emerged behind Marcus. She said nothing to Craig. She looked at Marcus. And in that look was something she could not have named precisely, but that Marcus understood completely. It was the look of someone who had already done the right thing once, had been overridden, and was deciding whether to do it again. He met her eyes briefly, a nod. Barely perceptible. She turned away and took out her phone again. Marcus walked back to row 1. Diana was reclining in seat 1. The pillow adjusted her bag open on the tray table. She had removed a document folder and was reviewing something with the focused composure of a woman who has decided the situation has been resolved in her favor and is now getting on with her day. He stood in the aisle. He looked at his seat. He reached into the pocket of his hoodie and typed a message. Not a call. A message. 4 words. Document everything, now. Ava Munro read those words and began making calls. Back in row 2, Brad Whitmore had given up any pretense of working. His laptop screen had gone to sleep. He was watching the aisle with the expression of a man who has staked out a position in the audience of something and does not want to move until the ending is clear. He looked at Marcus standing in the aisle. You know, he said with the measured tone of someone offering advice rather than commentary. Some situations are not worth the trouble. Taking the premium seat would be a reasonable choice. Marcus turned and looked at him with the full, steady attention he had given Diana earlier. In your experience, he said, which situations are worth the trouble? Brad Whitmore opened his mouth. Then he closed it. He reached forward and woke up his laptop screen. Sophia appeared beside Marcus, quietly, without announcement, standing 2 feet to his left, and slightly closer to Diana's line of sight than her position required. She was not a physical barrier. She was a witness, a visible one. Mr. Ellison, she said low enough that only he could hear. I wrote everything down, the exact words, the times, all of it. Marcus looked at her. Something moved across his face that was not quite surprise and not quite relief, but lived in the same neighborhood as both. You have been doing the right thing since I boarded, he said quietly. Keep doing it. Sophia nodded once. She did not leave. She remained standing precisely where she was, 2 feet to his left, slightly forward, holding her ground in the way that people hold ground when they have decided what side of a line they are on. She was 26 years old. She had said nothing on the intercom, issued no dramatic declaration. She had simply not moved. From seat 3, a Nathan Okafor watched her standing there. He added a second line of text to the stream. The young flight attendant just quietly moved to stand beside him. She has not said anything. She is just there. Comments. She is protecting him. She is going to get fired. No, she is doing her job. This is the most human thing I have seen all week. 9,400 viewers. Marcus stood in the aisle of his own aircraft and looked at the window above seat 1A. The tarmac below JFK was wet and gray. New York in November, the particular bleakness of a morning that has decided not to try. Puddles had formed in the low points between the runway lights, and the lights caught in those puddles and scattered outward in thin silver lines. He had approved the expansion of this terminal 4 years ago. He had stood in a hard hat in the rain and watched the first support structures go in. He was thinking about a different room now. He was 23 years old and wearing a hoodie very much like this one. Dark gray, worn at the elbows, the hood pulled back. He had been on his way to a meeting on the 14th floor of a building in Midtown with a venture partner who had agreed to spend 45 minutes listening to a business plan that Marcus had spent 4 months building and 6 months before that dreaming of building. He had taken the elevator to the 14th floor, walked to the reception desk, and given his name. The woman behind the desk had looked at him, at the hoodie, the jeans, the sneakers, and said with the practiced courtesy of someone who believed she was being kind, "Deliveries are through the side entrance, sir. Just around the building to the left," he had explained. She had not believed him. She had called security before he finished his second sentence. He had left, not because he was afraid, but because there was no version of that argument that ended well for the meeting waiting for him upstairs, and the meeting was what mattered. He had waited downstairs in the lobby, called the venture partner directly, and been walked up personally through a separate entrance. The meeting had gone well. The funding had come through. He never forgot the woman at the desk, not with anger. The anger had dissolved within the year, replaced by something more durable and more useful. He never forgot her because she had taught him something in those 30 seconds that no business school had managed to teach him in 4 years, that the world would consistently underestimate him based on the surface of things, and that his options were to either perform the markers of power that the world recognized, or to build something large enough that his presence became its own credential. He had chosen the second option. It had taken 12 years. He was 31 when it happened the second time. He had been traveling business class on a competing airline. This was before he owned one, on his way to Seattle to close the funding round that would become the foundation of what Apex Sky eventually grew into. He had been in jeans and a zip hoodie. He had been in his seat for 4 minutes when the flight attendant stopped beside him, looked at his boarding pass, and asked him to verify his seat assignment. He had looked around the cabin. He had counted the other passengers in business class. 11 of them. The flight attendant had not stopped at any other seat. Only his. He had verified his assignment. The flight attendant had smiled and moved on, and the plane had taken off, and no one had said anything else about it. But Marcus had sat for 6 hours staring at the sky, thinking about the question he had quietly asked himself in the dark of the cabin. What would it look like to own one of these? 3 years after that flight, he had the answer. He was standing in it now. The bag Diana Hartwell had thrown on the floor of his aircraft was back in the overhead compartment. He had picked it up without ceremony and put it back where it belonged. He was not going to move. Not because of pride. Not because of what it would look like if he moved. He was staying because every time a person in his position chose the easier exit, the person who had forced the choice walked away, confirmed in everything they believed. And the next person who boarded in a hoodie, the one who did not own the airline, the one who had nothing but a boarding pass and a legal right to be in their seat, that person would face the same moment with slightly more weight against them because once again the system had bent for the noise. He was done choosing the easier exit. He had chosen it too many times, in too many rooms, with too many faces delivering too many versions of the same message. Not today. I want to pause here for a second because this is the moment where everything changes. Marcus is standing in the aisle of his own airline. He has been calm from the first word. He has not raised his voice, not threatened anyone, not made a single move that anyone could call aggressive. He has shown his boarding pass. He has picked his bag up off the floor without saying a single angry word about the fact that it was put there. And he is still there. Now I want to ask you something direct. If you were Marcus in that moment, standing in your own space, dressed the way you felt like dressing that morning, watching someone sit in your seat after throwing your bag on the ground, what would you do? Would you take the voucher? Would you move to premium economy and tell yourself it is not worth the fight? Would you calculate the cost of the confrontation against the value of the principle and decide that today is not the day? Or would you stay? Comment right now and tell me. 3 words. What would you do? Because what happens next, what Marcus does in the next 15 minutes, is one of the most extraordinary things I have ever told in these stories. And it does not start with shouting. It does not start with a speech. It starts with a woman who makes one final mistake. A very loud, very public, very permanently recorded final mistake. Stay with me. Diana Hartwell did not look up from her documents when Marcus returned to stand in the aisle. She had expected him to have returned to find her settled and the situation resolved. The lead flight attendant had been spoken to, the optics had been managed, the man had been offered an alternative. The sequence of events that in Diana's experience always terminated in the correct outcome. She turned a page in her folder and made a small notation in the margin. The silence from the aisle stretched past comfortable. She looked up. Marcus was standing precisely where he had been standing when he left for the galley. Same posture, same stillness. Eyes on her. Not threatening, not performing, just present with a totality that she was finding increasingly difficult to respond to with the tools she had available. She set her folder down. Is there something else, she said? My seat, Marcus said. Diana exhaled through her nose. I have already spoken to the flight attendant. The flight attendant did not resolve anything, Marcus said. He asked me to move. I declined. I am still standing in the aisle of my own aircraft. Diana's eyes narrowed at the phrasing. My own aircraft. She filed it somewhere, not understanding it yet, but noting the oddness of it. She reached up and pressed the call button above seat 1A, one press clean. Sophia appeared. Diana smiled at her, a social smile, the kind deployed to establish alliance. Would you bring me a champagne, please, and perhaps speak to your supervisor about getting this sorted? Ma'am, Sophia said carefully, the situation has been... Diana pressed the call button again, twice. The dings cut through the cabin, sharp, insistent, slightly aggressive. Several passengers who had gone back to their reading or their screens looked up again. I am not comfortable, Diana announced. Not to Sophia specifically, to the cabin. Her voice had lifted to a register that was designed to carry without appearing to shout. This man is making me uncomfortable. I am asking for assistance. The man in the blue cardigan 3 rows back looked at Marcus, then at Diana, and his expression completed the sentence his mouth was not saying. From seat 3, a Nathan Okafor's stream 18,000 viewers. A new comment was arriving every 2 to 3 seconds. She called for help because he is standing there. I cannot believe this. Someone needs to call the airline. The flight attendant is right there. Why is she not doing something? Craig Mercer reappeared from forward of the galley. He looked from Diana to Marcus to Sophia and made the same calculation he had made before, and for the second time he made it wrong. Mrs. Hartwell, what can we... I want him removed, she said. Clearly now. No longer performing patience. He is intimidating me. The word hit the cabin air and landed with a weight it did not earn. Intimidating. The man who had not raised his voice. The man who had not stepped toward her, not gestured aggressively, not said a single word in the 22 minutes since she had thrown his bag on the floor that could be characterized by any reasonable standard as threatening. That man, standing in the aisle of his own aircraft boarding pass in his pocket, carry-on correctly stored, waiting with a stillness that had somehow become the most powerful thing in the cabin. Intimidating. Sophia's hands closed at her sides. From row 3, a woman in a gray wrap said quietly but audibly, She is the one causing the scene. Diana turned and located the voice, found the face, held it for 2 seconds with an expression that had ended conversations in boardrooms and cocktail parties and charity galas for the better part of 3 decades. The woman in the gray wrap looked straight back at her and did not look away. Diana returned her attention to Craig. Brad Whitmore had closed his laptop entirely. He was watching openly now, laptop lid down, leaning slightly forward in 2A with the expression of a man at a sporting event who had been rooting for one team and is beginning to suspect he may have bet wrong. Craig looked at Marcus with an expression of genuine appeal. Not professional management, but human appeal. Please help me here. It was visible, and it was honest, and it was the most decent thing Craig had done in the last 20 minutes. Marcus looked at him. "You want me to make this easier for you," he said. "Sir." By leaving Marcus finished, Craig's shoulders dropped a fraction of an inch. Diana reached forward. She did not calculate this. It was not strategy. It was frustration expressing itself through the nearest available object. And the nearest available object was the strap of Marcus's bag where it rested against the upper edge of the overhead compartment. She pulled it. The bag came out of the compartment and hit the aisle carpet for the second time. This time the cabin did not flinch. It exhaled. Nathan Okafor, 29,000 viewers. He had not moved. He had not spoken. He had not added a single word of commentary to the stream since the line about Sophia standing beside Marcus. The screen was receiving 47 comments per second. Lacey Drummond had dropped her phone, picked it back up, and posted a third Instagram story. Just her face soundless, pointing directly at the overhead compartment, then at the floor, then spreading her hands in the universal gesture of, "Are you seeing this?" 61,000 views in 6 minutes. Marcus looked at his bag. He looked at it for a long time. Long enough that the looking itself became the loudest thing happening in the cabin. He took his phone out of his hoodie pocket. He pressed call. One ring, the line connected. Ava. His voice was the same as it had been in every exchange in this cabin. Low, even carrying without effort, seat 1A, flight 214. "I need port authority at the gate and I need Captain Gallardo briefed immediately." From the other end, quiet. Crisp, the voice of someone who has been watching a live stream for 20 minutes and making calls while watching already documented. "Everything is logged. Roy is standing by for your signal." Diana heard the word stream. She heard it clearly. The stream. And for the first time since she had stepped onto this aircraft, her head moved, not to Marcus, to the cabin, to the people around her, to the phones. There were so many phones. They were not all raised. Most were angled casually, resting on armrests or held low in laps. But the screens were all facing toward row 1, every single one. Something happened in Diana Hartwell's expression that had not happened before. Not frustration, not calculation, not the manufactured performance of a woman who is accustomed to winning. Something smaller and more honest than any of those things. A crack. Thin. Fast. Almost invisible. Almost. "What is—" she started. 30,000 people are watching, Nathan Okafor said from seat 3A. He said it quietly. Not for effect. Because it was factually accurate. His stream was at 31,400 viewers, and he was simply providing the information that he felt was relevant to the situation. Diana stared at him. He held up his phone, angled it slightly so the viewer count was visible from row 1. The number was now 32,000. Diana looked at the number, then at the phone, then at the phones around her, then at her own hands, which were still holding the strap of the bag she had just thrown on the floor for the second time. Marcus picked up the bag, gently. He placed it back in the overhead compartment. He closed the compartment door with a soft, decisive click. He turned around and looked at Diana Hartwell. "I am done waiting," he said. "The airport police are on their way. And before they get here, I want to give you one opportunity, just one, to step out of my seat. Step." Diana opened her mouth. "And sit in yours," Marcus said. Quietly. Finally. As though the last 35 minutes had been a patient explanation leading to this sentence, and the sentence was not an argument, but simply the conclusion. One opportunity. Diana looked at him. Her jaw was tight. Her hands were flat on the armrests of seat 1A. She looked at the phones. She looked at Craig, who was standing in the aisle with his hands at his sides, and the expression of a man who has realized too late what he has been part of. She did not move. Denise Park had been standing at the curtain between business class and first class for 6 minutes. She was 38 years old, the senior purser on Flight 214 12 years with Apex Sky, and she had a particular quality of stillness that came from having handled every variety of in-flight crisis that a transcontinental aircraft could produce. She had stood behind the curtain and listened to the escalation in first class with the focused attention of someone taking an inventory. Now she stepped through. She did not look at Diana. She looked at Craig. "I need a word," she said. Craig followed her to the mid-galley. Denise spoke in the low, precise voice she used when things were serious, and there was no time for unnecessary phrasing. "We need the captain," she said. "Now." "Craig, Denise, she is a diamond level." She has thrown a passenger's bag on the floor twice, Denise said. On camera, in front of a live stream that currently has over 30,000 viewers. She looked at him steadily. That is not a service complaint. That is assault. And if we push back from this gate without addressing it, we are endorsing it. Craig's face went through several transitions in the space of 4 seconds. The corporate account, he started. Craig. Denise's voice did not rise. When this lands, and it is landing right now while we are standing here. Do you want your name attached to the part where the airline did something or the part where the airline did nothing? A pause, shorter than it might have been. Craig turned and walked to the cockpit. Captain Roy Gallardo was 55 years old. He had been flying commercial aircraft for 28 years. He had a pilot's particular relationship with facts, an aversion to anything that was not the situation as it actually existed, stripped of everything that people preferred it to be. He listened to Craig's account without interrupting. He asked 2 questions. Is the assigned passenger still on board? Yes. Has property been thrown? Twice. Gallardo said nothing for a moment. He looked at the instrument panel, not reading it, simply letting the familiar surface of the thing he knew best give him a half-second of ground. And why he said, are we having this conversation instead of having security on board? Craig swallowed. The corporate account. Mrs. Hartwell's husband. I do not fly corporate, Gallardo said. I fly this aircraft and I am responsible for every person on it. He reached for the radio. Get Port Authority to the gate. Reconnect the jet bridge. We are not moving until this is resolved correctly. Craig, yes, sir. The jet bridge reconnected 12 seconds later. The sound traveled through the aircraft the way sound does. First as vibration through the floor, a low mechanical thud, then the settling hum of something heavy re-establishing contact. Every passenger felt it. Several looked up from screens and books. Diana felt it. Her smile, which had been thinning since Nathan Okafor had held up his phone, became something else entirely. Something that was not a smile but had not yet decided what it was. She looked toward the front of the cabin. Through the partial gap of the cockpit door, she could see Craig speaking to someone, speaking with both hands, which was not characteristic, and the shape of Captain Gallardo's uniform visible beyond him and the posture of that uniform which was not accommodating. What is happening? She said. Not a question. A demand addressed to nobody in particular. Nathan Okafor checked his stream. 58,000 viewers. He typed one line, jet bridge just reconnected. This flight is not leaving. Something is happening. Within 90 seconds, the comment section of the stream referenced 5 separate news outlets by name. 2 of them were already pulling the clip. Lacey Drummond posted her 4th Instagram story, a slow pan of the first-class cabin, 3 seconds of Diana sitting in 1A, 3 seconds of Marcus standing quietly in the aisle, and 1 second of the overhead bin. No caption, no words, just the truth assembled from sequence. 80,000 views in 7 minutes. Brad Whitmore leaned back from his laptop. All the way back, shoulders against the seat, the body language of a man who has decided to remove himself from something he should not have been adjacent to. He looked at the ceiling. He looked at his laptop. He did not look at Marcus. Sophia was not in the galley. She was standing in the aisle 3 feet from Marcus in exactly the position she had taken up before, a position that was technically valid for a flight attendant conducting a pre-departure check, and that happened to place her body between Diana's eye line and Marcus's left shoulder. She had not been asked to stand there. She had not been told to stand there. She had decided. Her phone was in her left-hand documentation complete. Her right hand was at her side open calm. She was not shaking anymore. She looked at Marcus and said quietly, Captain Gallardo is being briefed right now. Marcus nodded. Are you all right? She said. I am fine, he said. Then, after a pause, you have done everything right since I boarded. I want you to know that. Sophia did not respond immediately. She looked at the floor for a second, then back up at him. She was quiet for a moment in the way that people are quiet when something matters to them. I almost did not say anything the first time she said. But you did, he said. She nodded once. From the back of the first-class section, the older woman who had been shaking her head slowly since the beginning stood up. She was perhaps 68, white-haired, wearing a cardigan the color of old rose. She moved forward one row and sat in the seat directly across from Diana Hartwell, and looked at her with the expression of a woman who had lived long enough that she no longer had any patience for the kind of careful silence that enabled wrong things to continue. She did not say anything. She simply sat down across from Diana and looked at her. Diana met her gaze, then she looked away first. Brad Whitmore, observing this from 2 rows back, pressed his lips together and said nothing. Nathan Okafor watched the older woman sit down. He added one more text line to the stream, the only emotional notation he had offered in the entire broadcast. The older woman just moved seats to sit across from her. Silent. Just watching. 64,000 viewers. Comments. This woman is my hero. She is doing what the airline should have done. Quiet courage. I am crying. Why am I crying? The jet bridge was connected. The boarding door was still open. Port Authority was 3 minutes away. And Marcus Ellison stood in the aisle of Apex Sky Flight 214, which he had ordered, which he had funded, which he had built from a pitch deck, and a flashback, and 100 moments exactly like this one in rooms exactly like this one, and waited. The footsteps came from the jet bridge, measured heavy, purposeful. 2 Port Authority officers stepped through the boarding door. Dark uniforms, broad shoulders, the particular alertness of people trained to read a room before acting in it. The lead officer scanned first class in a practice sweep. His gaze moved along the rows, noted the phones, the watchers, the quality of the silence, the woman in the cream blazer in seat 1A, and the man standing in the aisle. It stopped on the man in the aisle, not with suspicion, with assessment. The way experienced people look at something when they are trying to understand it rather than judge it. "Sir," the officer said, stepping forward, "we received a call from the flight deck. Can you tell me what happened?" Diana rose from seat 1A with the coordinated energy of someone who has been waiting for this moment and has prepared for it. Her voice had shifted registers. No longer cool and imperious, now pitched toward distress, the performance of a woman who had been endangered and was finally receiving help. "Officer, thank God. This man has been harassing me. He refused to vacate my seat. He has been aggressive and threatening, and I—" "Ma'am?" The officer's voice was not unkind, but it was clear. "Please wait." He turned back to Marcus. "Sir, what happened?" Marcus looked at the officer. He looked at him with the same complete, unhurried attention he had given everything else in this cabin for the past 40 minutes. "She is sitting in my assigned seat," he said. "Seat 1A. My boarding pass documents the assignment." He reached into his pocket and produced it. "She has thrown my bag from the overhead compartment twice. The second time occurred approximately 12 minutes ago. Both incidents were witnessed by the cabin crew and are on film." The officer took the boarding pass. He examined it. He looked at Diana. He looked at seat 1A. "Mrs. Hartwell," he said, "your boarding pass, please." Diana produced hers. The officer looked at it. He looked at the seat number. He looked at the headrest marker on 1A and the headrest marker on 1B, and then back at Diana's boarding pass. "Ma'am," he said, "seat 1B is your assigned seat." "There has been an error in the system. The assignment is documented," the officer said. He looked at Craig, who nodded immediately. The nod of a man who has decided that the moment for ambiguity has passed. "Ma'am, additionally, throwing a passenger's property constitutes assault. I need you to step into the aisle." Diana's face flushed. "I am not leaving this seat. Do you have any idea who my husband is? His firm spends—" "Ma'am," the officer said, and his tone had shifted in the way that tone shifts when patience has reached its functional limit. "Step into the aisle." Diana looked at Marcus. She was looking for something. A flinch, an apology, an expression that would give her one more lever to pull. She was looking for the version of this where she still had a way out. Marcus looked back at her. He looked at her the way he had been looking at things since he boarded this flight, completely steadily without any visible effort to make her comfortable or uncomfortable, simply with the full weight of his attention. He took one step toward her, not aggressive, not threatening. The step of a man who has been patient for a very long time and has arrived at the moment when patience makes way for something more permanent. "You told me," he said, "that the help sits in the back." His voice had not risen. It had not needed to rise. It was the same low, even register it had been in since the first exchange, but something in it had settled into a final gear. The gear that says this is not the beginning of a conversation, it is the conclusion of one. Diana said, You said it where the row could hear. Marcus continued. You said it where the rows behind the row could hear. You said it in the same breath that you pointed me toward the back of an aircraft you had no more claim to than any other person who bought a seat. He paused. So let me tell you something about this aircraft. Diana Hartwell stood completely still. Sophia in the aisle had stopped breathing. Nathan Okafor's stream 89,000 viewers. Comments arriving in an unreadable blur. Marcus looked around the cabin. Slowly, deliberately. Taking in the phones, the watchers, the older woman sitting across from Diana's empty seat. Brad Whitmore's closed laptop. Craig standing by the cockpit door. Denise standing by the galley curtain. Sophia 3 feet away with her hand at her side and her eyes on him. Then he looked back at Diana. I have been flying in this cabin for 11 years, he said. I have sat in this seat, this specific seat, on this specific route, more times than you have Mrs. Hartwell. I have flown in the seats behind it and the seats ahead of it. I have sat on every flight operated by this airline. Do you know why? Diana was not breathing either. Because I own it, Marcus said. Silence. Not the electric silence of shock. The empty silence. The silence that comes when a structure collapses fast enough that the air has not yet decided what to fill the space with. My name is Marcus Ellison, he said. I am the CEO and controlling shareholder of Apex Sky Airlines. This aircraft, this specific aircraft, this cabin, this seat is mine. The officer beside him had gone very still. He looked at Marcus. Something moved in his expression, a recalibration, precise and fast. Sir, the officer said quietly, I have received confirmation from the flight deck. 3 seconds. Brad Whitmore's mouth had opened. It did not close. From seat 3, a Nathan Okafor looked at his viewer count 91,000. He stared at the number for a moment and then set the phone down on the tray table and simply watched with his own eyes for the first time in 40 minutes. Lacey Drummond had stopped filming entirely. She was just sitting there with her hands flat on her thighs, staring. From somewhere in the rows behind them, a passenger said, not loudly, not performing, just the words escaping, "Oh my God." Diana Hartwell's face had drained of color in the way that faces drain when the thing they are experiencing is too large and too fast for the body to manage with any dignity. Her hands, the hands that had pointed and snapped and taken hold of his bag twice, were trembling on the armrests of seat 1A. Her mouth moved. No sound. Then that cannot. She laughed. A thin, high sound. Wrong. You are in a hoodie. You cannot. The owner, Marcus said, sits wherever he wants. He said it simply, without performance. The way someone states a fact that has always been true and has simply been waiting to be stated. 5 seconds. Diana stared at him. Her world was reassembling itself around those words, and it was assembling into something that did not have a place for her in first class or anywhere comfortable. The officer stepped forward. Mrs. Hartwell, he said. He unclipped his restraints. And Diana Hartwell, who had flown diamond level for 11 years, who had snapped her fingers and thrown bags and announced her husband's annual spend and pointed toward the back of airplanes, finally completely ran out of levers. No, she said. Her voice broke on the word. No, please. I did not know. I did not. You made a decision before I said a single word, Marcus said, quietly, finally, based on what I was wearing. That was the decision. Everything else followed from it. The officer took her arm gently and with complete authority. She was still talking as she was guided toward the boarding door. Fragments of protest. Her husband's name a reference to lawyers, then simply no, no, no in a descending register that the cabin absorbed without comment. No one applauded. No one laughed. The cabin simply watched in the particular quality of silence that attends things that are irreversible. The silence of witnesses who understand that what they are seeing will not be undone. Lacey Drummond's 5th Instagram story was a single static frame, the empty seat 1. A cream leather headrest upright, the window beside it showing the gray tarmac, the overhead compartment above it closed. No caption. 420,000 views by the time the flight landed. Nathan Okafor stopped the live stream at the moment Diana's feet crossed the threshold of the boarding door. 104,000 viewers at termination. He saved the recording, encrypted the file, and sent it to 2 people he trusted before he did anything else. The jet bridge closed. Craig Mercer stood near the cockpit door in the specific stillness of a man who has finished being part of the wrong thing and is trying to understand how he got there. He looked at Marcus, who had returned to seat 1A and was settling in with a controlled quietness. Adjusting the headrest, placing his bag in the correct position, the ordinary motions of a person preparing for a flight that had been delayed and was now perhaps finally going to leave. Craig walked toward him. He did not have anything prepared. He simply stopped beside seat 1A and looked at Marcus and said, "I should have stopped this at the beginning. I made the wrong calculation. I am sorry." Marcus looked at him. "Make sure it does not happen to the next person," he said. "Yes, sir," Craig said. It was a short exchange. It was the most honest thing Craig had said all morning. Sophia approached from the galley. Different now. The tremor in her hands that had been present since the first confrontation was gone. She stopped beside 1A and looked at Marcus with an expression that was neither congratulatory nor relieved, but something more specific. The expression of someone who has gotten through something and is deciding how to hold it. "Are you all right?" she said. Marcus said. "You did everything correctly, from the first moment." "I almost did not say anything when she asked me to check your pass," Sophia said. "Not the first time. For about 2 seconds I thought, if I back him up, Craig is going to be unhappy with me, and the woman is going to file a complaint, and I am 6 months into this route." She paused. "And then I looked at the manifest, and I thought the manifest says what the manifest says. That is not an opinion. That is just the fact." "That is exactly what it is," Marcus said. Sophia nodded. "That is what I told myself. And then it got easier." "It gets easier," Marcus agreed, "every time you do it." Brad Whitmore did not approach row 1. He had relocated himself to seat 2B as close to the galley side of the cabin as he could manage. He sat with his laptop open but not running, staring at the black screen of it with the expression of a man reviewing a longer record than the one that had just occurred in the last 40 minutes. He did not speak to Marcus. The absence of that conversation was itself a kind of answer. Ava Monroe called as the plane finished its pre-departure safety checks. "Stream hit 200,000 while you were still speaking," she said. "It is on 6 news platforms. We are getting ahead of it." "Good," Marcus said. "Then do not hide from it." "What do you want me to release?" she said. Marcus was quiet for a moment. He looked out the window. The tarmac was clearing, the last ground crew vehicles pulling back. The morning light was still gray but had lightened slightly. New York deciding at the last moment to acknowledge the day. "Release Sophia Reyes's name," he said. "Tell them she documented the incident from the beginning, that she was the first crew member to formally advocate for the correct assignment, and that she is being promoted to senior flight attendant effective today. Ava, anything about Mrs. Hartwell? The police have what they need. Her membership is permanently revoked. That is all we need to say." "And you?" Marcus looked at his reflection in the cabin window. The dark hoodie, the jeans, the face of a man who was 44 years old and had been having some version of this morning since he was 23, and who had today finally stayed. "Tell them I was flying," he said. "Tell them I sat in my seat." Captain Gallardo's voice came over the intercom. Measured, professional, carrying none of what he knew about the next 11 hours or the previous 40 minutes. "Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your patience during our delay. We are now cleared for departure. Flight time to Los Angeles is approximately 5 hours and 40 minutes. Sit back and let us take care of you." The aircraft moved. Marcus closed his eyes. Not to sleep. Not yet. Just to be still for a moment inside the particular quality of after, which was quieter than the before and heavier than the during, and which, if you let yourself be inside it, without reaching for the next thing, felt a little like being allowed to exist. The terminal holding room was small and beige, and smelled of industrial cleaner and recycled air. Diana Hartwell sat on a plastic chair with her monogrammed bag in her lap, and her blazer still on, because taking the blazer off would have required a decision she was not ready to make. One of the Port Authority officers had given her a paper cup of water. She had not drunk from it. It sat on the floor beside her chair, and the water was still. Outside, through a rectangular window set too high in the wall to see anything but sky, New York continued. Traffic hummed. An aircraft took off somewhere to the east, and the sound of it moved through the window and into the room, and Diana heard it without being able to say what it was. She was not thinking about her lawyer. She was not thinking about her husband, or his corporate account, or the calls she was going to need to make, or the statement that would need to be crafted. All of that was real and approaching, and she understood its dimensions clearly. She would deal with it. She had always dealt with things. She was thinking about a man in a dark hoodie sitting in a seat. She was thinking about the 3 seconds. She could identify them precisely now with the clarity that arrives after everything is done. The 3 seconds when she had walked into that first-class cabin and her eyes had moved along row 1 and stopped. And in those 3 seconds before he had spoken, before she had spoken, before anything at all had happened, she had already decided. She had not thought about it in those terms at the time. She had thought about her diamond membership and her window seat and the work she needed to do and the 11 years she had been sitting in 1A on this specific route. She had thought about those things in the foreground and in the background, quiet, instantaneous, requiring no deliberate thought at all. She had looked at a man she had never met and decided what he was, and he had been by every measure available, boarding pass, reservation, ownership of the aircraft itself, exactly what she had refused to see. The paper cup of water sat perfectly still. Diana looked at her hands. They were not shaking anymore. They had stopped shaking somewhere in the last 20 minutes in the specific aftermath of adrenaline that left everything very clear and very cold. She looked at the hands that had snapped fingers and pointed and pulled the bag out of the overhead compartment twice, and she did not find in them what she was looking for. She had wanted to say something in those last seconds before the officer had taken her arm. She had wanted to say something directly to Marcus Ellison. Not an explanation, not a justification, something else. Something she could not get to the words of. The apology that she had begun in the aisle had been for the wrong reason. Not because she had understood what she had done, but because she had understood what it was going to cost her. Those were different apologies. She knew the difference. She sat in the plastic chair and turned the right apology over in her mind, examining it, trying to find where it started. It started, she understood now, in those 3 seconds in the aisle. It started before a single word was spoken. It started with the hoodie. With the absence of markers she recognized. With the gap between what she expected and what was there, and the way she had filled that gap, not with a question, but with a conclusion. She had never examined that mechanism before. She had never had to. It had always worked. Quietly, efficiently, so smoothly integrated into how she moved through the world that she had never distinguished it from intelligence, or judgment, or experience. But it was none of those things. It was a machine for producing wrong answers, and she had operated it without question for 52 years. The paper cup of water was still sitting on the floor. She picked it up and drank from it. The water was lukewarm and tasted of plastic, and she finished the whole cup. Outside, another aircraft moved somewhere in the distance, its engines rising through the departure sequence. The gathering roar, the moment of commitment, then the sound pulling away and thinning into sky. She did not know which airline. She did not know if it was one she had flown on before. She folded the paper cup in half and held it in both hands. What she owed, to the man in the seat, to the young flight attendant with the shaking hands, to everyone who had watched, was not an apology delivered in a moment of self-preservation. It was something much quieter and much harder. It was the work of dismantling a machine she had spent her whole life refusing to name. She was not sure she could do it. She sat in the plastic chair in the beige room and did not look away from that uncertainty. She let it be exactly as large as it was. That at least was a beginning. The wheels touched down at Los Angeles International just before noon. Marcus remained in his seat as the cabin emptied. The usual patient queue of passengers collecting their bags, stretching their legs, checking phones for the messages that had accumulated at altitude. He did not rush. He had a meeting in the morning and an evening free, and he was in no hurry to trade the quiet of the settled aircraft for the noise of the terminal. When the last passenger had cleared the aisle, he gathered his bag and walked toward the forward door. Captain Gallardo was standing at the threshold between the cockpit and the cabin jacket on hat in hand. He extended his hand. "Good flight, sir," he said. Marcus shook it. "Good flight." It was a short exchange. Both of them understood what it meant. At the cabin door, Sophia was conducting her post-flight check. She straightened up when she heard Marcus approaching. "Thank you," she said. She had already said it once on the plane. She said it again because once had not been enough. "Do not thank me," Marcus said. "You did the work. You documented it from the beginning. You stood where you stood. Ava Monroe is going to contact you about the promotion before you land on your next trip. Senior flight attendant effective immediately. You earned it before today, but today made sure it was visible." Sophia looked at him. She opened her mouth, closed it, then said, "I was not standing there for a promotion." "I know," Marcus said. "That is exactly why it is yours." He stepped off the aircraft. Craig Mercer was at the far end of the jet bridge, hands in his pockets, watching the floor. When Marcus came through, Craig looked up. "I enrolled in the bias awareness training this morning," he said. "The internal program, before we landed." Marcus looked at him. "I know it does not fix what I did," Craig said, "but it is a start." "It is," Marcus said. He said nothing else. He left Craig with the only thing that was actually useful. The truth, undecorated. Ava Monroe met him at the terminal exit with a coffee and a tablet showing 4 headlines and a viewer count. "Stream hit 2.6 million total views by the time I walked in here," she said. "The network pickups are clean. The full footage, not the cropped version, context intact." "Good," he said. "Sophia's promotion is drafted. I just need your signature. Send it. And one more thing." She handed him the tablet. The headline read, "Apex Sky CEO refuses to yield seat in first-class incident." Beneath it, in a secondary caption, the airline's CEO was dressed in a hoodie and sneakers. No one knew who he was. That was the point. Marcus read it once, then he handed the tablet back. "That is the story," he said. "That is the story," Ava agreed. He walked out into the Los Angeles afternoon. A different gray than New York, warmer, softer at the edges. The kind of gray that was thinking about becoming something else by late afternoon. He did not feel like a man who had won something. He felt like a man who had done what was necessary and would be glad later when the gladness caught up to him. 3 months later, the training room at Apex Sky's Atlanta Crew Center had the particular lighting of a space that had recently been renovated. Brighter than it used to be, less institutional, with long tables and movable chairs and a screen at the front that showed a static frame of a first-class cabin. Sophia Reyes stood at the front of the room with 32 new flight attendants watching her. She had been doing this for 8 weeks. Every new hire cohort, every crew center on every route she flew, she had been coming into rooms like this one and telling the truth about a morning in November without any notes, without a prepared script, without anything except the memory of it and what she had learned inside it. "The thing I want you to understand," she said, "is that I almost did not say anything." The room was quiet in the specific way that rooms are quiet when people are listening rather than waiting to speak. The first time Mrs. Hartwell asked me to check his boarding pass, I checked it. I had the answer in 15 seconds. And for about 2 seconds after that, I thought, if I confirm this, if I say out loud that she is wrong and he is right, Craig is going to be unhappy with me and she is going to file a complaint, and I am 6 months into this route and I do not have a lot of runway to be making enemies in first class. She paused. I thought all of that in 2 seconds. And then I looked at the manifest and I thought the manifest says what it says. That is not an opinion. That is a fact. And my job, the actual job, not the comfortable version of the job, is to tell the truth about the fact. A hand went up in the 3rd row. A young woman, early 20s, first week of the program. "What would you have done," she said, "if Craig had told you to keep quiet after that? If he had asked you directly not to back Mr. Ellison up?" Sophia was quiet for a moment. "I have thought about that question a lot," she said. "And I think the honest answer is, I would have been very afraid. And I would have done it anyway. Because the thing I had to decide in that moment was not what Craig would think of me or what Mrs. Hartwell would put in her complaint. The thing I had to decide was what kind of flight attendant am I going to be, not on the days when it is easy, on the day when it is not." She looked at the room. "You are going to have days like that," she said. "Maybe not that specific day, but some version of it. And when it comes, the manifest is always your anchor. Not the loudest voice, not the most expensive customer, not what is going to be most comfortable for your next performance review. The truth of what the record says. She looked at the screen behind her, the static frame of the first-class cabin. Do the job, she said, the actual job. Craig Mercer completed the internal bias training program and applied independently to serve on the crew accountability panel that Apex Sky formed in the months following the incident. He was not the obvious candidate. He was not sure he deserved the seat. He applied anyway for the same reason Sophia had confirmed the boarding pass, because the right thing and the easy thing had diverged and he had already seen what happened when he chose easy. He was accepted. Nathan Okafor did not sell the footage. He did not license it, syndicate it, or accept any of the 14 offers that arrived in his inbox in the week following the incident. He kept it on his channel unedited with a single pinned comment that read, "I did not say a word." The truth did all the talking. He went back to filming Real Rooms. Diana Hartwell received a misdemeanor charge for assault, completed community service, and lost her Diamond membership permanently. Her husband's corporate contract with Apex Sky was terminated by the company. His board had reviewed the footage and made a calculation of their own. She did not give interviews. 3 months after the incident, she enrolled in a program at a local community center that she had passed 1,000 times without stopping. She did not announce this. She simply went. Whether what she found there became what she needed, that story belongs to her. 6 months after Flight 214, Marcus arrived at JFK Terminal 4 on a Tuesday morning in May. The terminal was fully awake, gates filling coffee lines 3 deep, the particular energy of a building that was processing 10,000 different journeys at once. He moved through it in a dark jacket and clean sneakers carry-on over one shoulder. At the check-in desk, a young agent, she looked new, maybe 3 months in, scanned his boarding pass and looked at her screen and looked back up and smiled the way people smile when the information is clean and the morning is moving correctly. "Seat 1, a Mr. Ellison," she said. "Welcome aboard." No pause before the welcome. No look from the screen to his face that lasted a beat longer than a look needed to. No moment in which his clothes were weighed against the seat number on the pass. Just "Seat 1, a welcome aboard." It was such a small thing. It was the thing that should have always been true, and was now in this moment, in this terminal, with this agent who did not know his story and was simply doing her job correctly. It was true. He thanked her and walked to the gate. He found a seat by the window and watched the tarmac. Ground crew moving with the particular purpose of people who understood their role in something larger. A panel inspection on the nose gear housing, completed permanent no duct tape. He noted this. When boarding opened, he joined the back of the priority line. He boarded last. He found seat 1A, put his bag in the overhead compartment, and sat down. He looked out the window. The morning was clear. Not the gray November morning of 6 months ago, but a blue sky May morning, the kind that made New York look like it had been trying all along and had finally gotten it right. The runway lights were silver in the early sun. He buckled in. No one came to ask if he was sure about the seat. No one pressed a call button or pointed at the back of the plane. No fingers snapped in the cold air of a first-class cabin while the rest of the row watched to see what would happen. Just a seat, just a window, just a man on a flight going somewhere the way it should have always been. He thought about Sophia standing in the aisle with her hands at her sides and her documentation complete. He thought about Gallardo's voice, "I do not fly corporate. I fly this aircraft." He thought about the woman in the old rose cardigan who had quietly relocated herself to sit across from Diana without a word, and about Nathan Okafor who had pointed a camera at the truth and let it speak. He thought about the thousands of people who would fly Apex Sky tomorrow, and the day after tomorrow, in seats they had paid for, dressed in whatever they had felt like wearing that morning without anyone throwing their bags on the floor or pointing toward the back of the plane. Most of them would never know what had been required to make that normal. That was fine. That was how it was supposed to work. Some things only matter if they outlast the moment that taught them. The engines rose. The aircraft moved. New York fell away beneath the wing. The terminals, the highways, the grid of the city organizing itself into the abstract geometry of altitude. He watched it shrink until it was pattern rather than place. Then he looked forward. The seatbelt sign dimmed. Marcus Ellison closed his eyes, and for the first time in a very long time there was nothing he needed to prove. If this story stayed with you, if Marcus's stillness moved you, if Sophia's quiet courage gave you something to hold on to, or if that woman in the old rose cardigan moving one row forward without saying a single word made you feel something real, then this is what I need you to do right now. Hit that like button. It tells the algorithm that stories like this one matter, that dignity matters, that quiet strength deserves to be seen. Subscribe to this channel because every week we come back here and tell another story where the person who refuses to move, who does the job with shaking hands, who points a camera at the truth and lets it speak, that person wins. And share this video with someone who needs it. Not someone who will agree with everything. Someone who needs to sit inside it for a few minutes and feel what it feels like when a person refuses to take the easier exit. Because those moments happen every day. In lobbies and offices and classrooms and cabins. Most of them do not have a camera. Most of them just have a person standing somewhere they earned the right to stand, deciding whether to stay. Leave me a comment right now. 3 words. What would you have done? I read every single one. This is a fictional story created for entertainment and inspirational purposes. All names, characters, airlines, and events depicted are entirely fictitious. Any resemblance to real persons or organizations is coincidental.